The anticipation had been building for weeks, whispers in the shadows as people wondered when the inevitable clash would take place. It was a battle that had been whispered about in legend, and now here it was. The fight between two of the most frightening legends the world had ever seen. Slender Man, with its eerie and alluring appearance, and Llorona, the weeping ghost who could make even the bravest souls cower with a single wail, stood locked in battle. And where was this epic showdown taking place? In the heart of a forest that seemed straight out of a horror movie. No moon was visible in the sky, as it was a night famously known as the Night of Nocturnal Gods, where every being that moved in the night came out to play. The ground was slick with dew, and every sound was suppressed, making the air seem almost suffocating. The trees in the forest loomed over the two beings, taller than any the mortal world had ever seen. The air was heavy with anticipation, both for the onlookers watching and the fighters themselves. And then, the moment that had been expected for what felt like an eternity finally arrived. Slender Man took the first move as his tentacles extended, and on the other side, Llorona took a step forward, her face stained with tears. Slender Man and Llorona were locked in a fierce battle, their powers clashing in an almost surreal display of strength and will. It was almost as if time had stopped as both beings dazzled the onlookers with their unfathomable power. Slender Man moved with alarming speed, tentacles extending out with lethal purpose. Llorona, meanwhile, seemed almost fluid in her movements, her ethereal form moving with an almost supernatural grace. With each move, the fight grew more intense, and the forest around them seemed to come alive with the sheer power on display. The mist was thicker than ever, and the trees swayed back and forth in protest as the battle raged on. Llorona's cries echoed through the forest, carrying a mournful tune that seemed to weaken Slender Man with every passing second. This was a battle about more than just physical strength. It was about the very essence of their power, the very thing that made them who they were. Slender Man landed a heavy blow, tentacles whipping toward Llorona with almost deadly force. But Llorona darted forward, weaving her way through his attack with a grace that was almost impossible to believe. As she closed in, she revealed a power that left everyone who had been watching stunned. The mist around them began to swirl, pulling in everything in its path. It was like something out of a great wizarding movie, drawing them into a vortex of almost mythical proportions. Slender Man struggled to keep his footing as the ground shook violently beneath them, his tentacles flailing around in a desperate attempt to regain control. Even with his almost superhuman abilities, it was clear he was overmatched. As the fight went on, the forest was becoming increasingly damaged. Trees that had once stood tall were uprooted, and the very ground shook with tremors that could be felt for miles around. But the power of Llorona's cries, which were ringing through the air with ever-increasing intensity, proved too much even for Slender Man to overcome. As the mist cleared, Llorona emerged victorious, but the forest was in ruins. Many trees had been uprooted, and the ground was littered with debris. A hush had fallen over the forest, broken only by the sound of Llorona's mournful cries. The survivors who had witnessed the epic struggle now wondered what would become of Slender Man. Some believed that he had been defeated, while others were not so sure. Where had he gone? Had he retreated somewhere deep into the forest, vowing revenge at a future date? Was he waiting for the opportune moment to strike again? Amidst the confusion, one thing was clear. The battle between Slender Man and Llorona was far from over. Whatever the final outcome, the memory of that night would linger in the minds of those who witnessed it for years to come. But one question lingered in everyone's minds: what happened to Slender Man? Despite a thorough search of the area, there was no sign of him. Many believed he had vanished into the ether, unable to bear the crushing defeat. Others, however, held on to hope, believing that he would return to even the score. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but no one had seen or heard of Slender Man. The forest had begun to return to its natural state, and Llorona, now considered a champion, had become a symbol of triumph over the unknown. But in the back of everyone's minds, the memory of Slender Man lingered, a shadowy reminder of the tenuous balance between the light and the dark. And then one night, a figure appeared in the woods, tall, slender, and unmistakable. It was Slender Man. His form was shrouded by the mist, and his eyes glittered menacingly in the moonlight. It was almost as if he'd been reborn from the darkness itself. The survivors who had gathered to pay their respects to La Llorona stood stock still, their breaths held, not knowing what to expect. But instead of lashing out, Slender Man remained motionless, almost as if he were waiting. And then, with a sudden, unexpected movement, he darted back into the shadows, disappearing from view. No one knew what would come next, but one thing was certain: the battle between Slender Man and La Llorona had not yet ended. The fight for supremacy between these two legends would continue, and only time would tell who would emerge victorious in the end.